Introducing me, yes, my name is Laurel Poole. I'm the Director of Admissions for the UCF College of Medicine MD program. I've been at the university for 18 years this year, and this will be my 11th year at the medical school. So I'm glad I have some time with you all to kind of give you some information about what you can be doing to prepare for medical school. I know that there's people probably who are freshmen here all the way to seniors who maybe just decided they want to apply to medical school, and there is a lot to do to prepare a competitive application. It's not something you can just wake up one day and say, I think I'll apply to medical school this admission cycle. You can, and they'll gladly take your money, but it likely will not result in the ending that you're hoping for. So feel free to interject with questions at any time. I don't mind questions in the chat or questions if you want to turn on your mic. And if you'd like to turn on your camera, I'd be very happy to see your faces. So we'll get ahead. So I know that sometimes when you hear these kinds of presentations, there's a lot of assumptions that you all know what all of the different terms are. And there's lots of different terms that are associated with admissions to medical school. So I like to just go over a few of the ones that maybe you aren't familiar with, particularly if you're early on in this process. So AMCAS is the national application system that most medical schools use in the United States. Texas has their own system, but if you're a Texan and you're applying anywhere else, you're going to use AMCAS. So it's kind of like the Common App that you would use for undergraduate admissions, where you fill out the application and then it gets disseminated to whatever schools that you've identified in that system. The MCAT. The MCAT is our standardized exam. Most medical schools are going to require an MCAT score to consider your application at all. The MSAR, the medical school admissions requirements, that is a very important resource for pre-meds. It's an online publication that medical schools update individually every single year, usually in January, with all of our admission requirements. It also has information like what specialties did people match into from that school? What's the cost of attendance? What's the average debt for a medical school graduate from that institution? What are the average MCATs, GPAs? What are the demographics of the school? So very important that as you get closer to the time at which you're going to apply, that you use the MSAR as a tool to identify the schools that are going to be the best fit for you, because applying to medical school can be very expensive. And you don't want to just be throwing spaghetti at the wall because it's highly competitive. And you want to make sure that your application aligns with the schools that you are applying to, not just metrically, but there are schools that have very specific missions, and they are only going to consider applicants who have demonstrated that they have done things that align with that mission. So, for instance, Florida State, they have a very specific mission there. And if you have not demonstrated that you have done things related to primary care or working in your community, it doesn't matter how strong you are academically, you're probably not going to be a good fit for them. So you don't want to be applying to schools that maybe your goals don't align with what they are looking for in their applicants. The fee waiver. So just like an undergrad, where you can get a fee waiver via the SAT, they also have that for the MCAT. So definitely don't be afraid of applying to medical school because of the cost. Because if you are eligible for a fee waiver, you do get access to other resources like MCAT study prep. Even once you're in medical school, that fee waiver that you got approved for entering into medical school will follow you to residency application fees as well. So make sure if you think you could be eligible that you do apply. It will save you a lot of money. It also allows us at the medical schools to waive your secondary fee, because not only are you paying a fee for the AMCAS application, most schools are going to have a secondary or a supplemental application they want you to fill out that's more pertinent to their own institution. And that usually has a fee associated with it. It's typically nominal, but they do add up. So if you're applying to a lot of schools, you could spend quite a bit of money in secondary fees. And if you were eligible for the fee waiver, most schools will waive that secondary fee. What is residency? So this is a call we get a lot in our office. We get people calling and saying very commonly that I want to be a dermatologist. Can I be a dermatologist if I come to your school? Yes, you can. But the way that becoming a physician and a specialized physician works is that you go to 4 years of medical school and then you do what is called residency training. So in your residency is when you do your specialized training in something like dermatology, pediatrics, OBGYN, surgery. We don't train you to be a dermatologist in the medical school. Every medical school, every MD program in the country is going to cover the same material, so you have general information before you go into that specialized training. The match is the process that matches you into that specialty training. So you'll spend 3 years of medical school learning lots of things. The first 2 years is typically basic science. The third year, you're going to go out into different clinical rotations. You're going to do pediatrics. You're going to do family medicine, surgery, psychiatry, peds, OBGYN, and then you're going to hopefully figure out what it is you want to be when you finally finish medical school. And through that process, then you will apply to residency programs in your 4th year of medical school, hopefully get lots of interviews. And then in March of every year, usually right around St. Patrick's Day, we have what's called the match. And that's where the medical residency programs, they rank ordered lists of everyone they interviewed. And then all the applicants who got interviewed make it their own ranked list. And then it gets cross-referenced in the match system. And on match day, so every medical student in the country will find out on the same day at the same time what program they matched into. If they matched into it, it's not a guaranteed thing, but most MD students will match into a residency. And that's where you'll know where you're going to do your training and what you're doing your training in. It shouldn't be too much of a surprise what you're doing your training in, because you apply generally for one specialty, but to many programs. And that's when you will begin after your 4th year, that specialized training. Any questions about any of that terminology or anything you've heard related to medical school applications that you didn't really understand?
Laurel, we have a question in the chat from Kate. They say, through what channels do we apply to get evaluated for fee waiver eligibility?
So I believe if you go on the AAMC website, you can apply prior to taking the MCAT, and they'll probably ask just for some documentation. It might be like parental tax information, things like that.
How far ahead can we apply through the website?
I would think when you're going to be applying to or filling out the forms to take the MCAT. So you can usually register for the MCAT pretty far out. If you go on the AAMC, so it's aamc.org. If you go on their website, they'll have lots of information about fee waiver, like when you can apply, how to apply, what documents you're going to need. Other questions? Okay, so this link, hopefully it opens up correctly. You all see that? Our website page?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, great. So on our website, we have a timeline, and that timeline will give you suggested times throughout the admission cycle, because the admission cycle really starts in May of every year, and we're not done until white coat, which is the first day of medical school, typically in late July, early August. So it's a very long admission cycle. Medical school starts in the fall of every year. We don't have spring terms. So in May of every year, the AMCAS application opens up. And that is when you can start filling out the application. It doesn't mean you have to be the first person to submit an application. Now, ideally, if you were very prepared and ready to go, you can get it all filled out, submitted, and that way AMCAS can proceed with verifying your grades, because they're going to ask for your transcripts to confirm all the grades that you put into your application. So, but don't feel like you have to have the first application that's submitted to AMCAS, because they get thousands of them all at once, and we don't get them until July 1, June 30th, July 1. So it's not like we get them immediately. And one thing that a lot of applicants think happens, and it does matter to apply earlier than later, because the longer you wait to apply, the more interview spots that are going to be taken up. But if you're a strong applicant, you have more time to work with. If you're not a strong applicant, it does not matter if you're the first one or the last one. The outcome's likely going to be the same. So you want to apply when you feel like your application is ready for prime time. You don't want to rush it and you also don't want to be waiting to the last minute. If you're submitting an AMCAS application at our deadline in November, you probably should have waited an admission cycle to apply. You shouldn't be waiting until November 15th to apply. In June, we will start receiving the applications, usually like the last day of June. So they will dump thousands of applications on each medical school to start reviewing. In July, we will send out secondary applications. Then there's a little bit of a lull until we get those back. And then in August, we will start reviewing applications and inviting people for interviews. We typically start interviewing the week before Labor Day. We do virtual interviews. We also have virtual in-person visits for students who are invited to interview. And we will review about 120 applications a week from August till December. The MCAT. So the latest MCAT you can take in an admission cycle is the exam that they offer. Usually it's in September is the last one. During COVID, they added some test dates, but it's rarely ever been in October. So September of the calendar year that you are applying, that's it. We don't take the January test date. So if you don't do well and you want to retake in January, we don't accept that date. So if you don't meet our minimum requirement of a 500 on the MCAT by September, your application would not be considered any longer. So you want to make sure you give yourself enough time to take the MCAT. And then if you needed to retake it, you'd have time to retake it. Our AMCAS deadline is November 15th. Most medical schools will have the same one. December 1st is our secondary application deadline. For those two dates, there is absolutely no exceptions. I do not make exceptions for anybody. It does not matter what has happened because you have 6 months to apply to medical school. So even if you have a family crisis on November 14th or November 15th at 10 p.m., I'm not going to make an exception. And that's why we don't suggest waiting till the last minute for either application. And people do it every year. It's rarely successful. It also kind of signals to the schools that you're not prioritizing this or prioritizing that particular school when you wait till the last minute to apply. So don't even concern yourself with these November and December deadlines because you now know that you should be applying much earlier than that. And that way, if there is an issue with your application or there's something else we need, that we have time to communicate that with you and you have time to do something about it. Because oftentimes what happens with applicants who apply or get their secondary in on November or December 1st in the middle of the night when we're not here working anymore, the last thing we check are your letters of recommendation. So if we go in, we see you filled out your secondary, then we go to your letters and we see 2 of them are good, 1 of them doesn't have a signature on it. Well, now your application is going to be rejected because we don't have all of the materials that we need for your application by the deadline. So you won't be given an opportunity to go ask that letter writer to resubmit with a signature. That's why you don't want to wait until the deadline. We will start admitting students in October. October 15th is the earliest any MD program can make offers unless you're an early decision applicant. And we have rolling admission. So we will admit students through March, and then there's kind of a quiet period until April when applicants who have multiple offers have to make decisions. And then we'll start utilizing our wait list. We have various recruitment events throughout the year to have applicants come and visit and get a feel for the school. And then in August is when we start school and we will welcome you here to the medical school building. Let's see. Okay. So any questions about any of that before I move on?
I wanted to ask if it's taken into consideration how long ago a letter of recommendation was written.
Yes, you don't want it to be too old. So I wouldn't ask like your freshman English teacher. I would just wait until it's closer to the time when you're going to apply. You might want to let a person know that you plan on asking them in the future. And obviously you want to maintain some relationship with that person so that they would expect to hear from you. But yeah, you don't want to just, I know you can put them in that like eFolio website, but you don't want all your letters to have old dates on them. And you might find that as you get closer to applying to medical school, there's other people who are better suited to writing you a letter that may have gotten to know you better or that you spent time with in a clinical setting, things like that.
So would say a year is appropriate. Sorry, would you say a year is appropriate?
Yeah, that's okay. I would just have the letter writer write the current year, even if there's somebody you knew from like a class from the year before. All right.
Laurel, I
Okay.
have one question in the chat, if you don't mind.
Yep.
Says, so when will you guys evaluate our hours, in parentheses, clinical, research, volunteering, close parentheses? Will we be able to add or update hours up until we submit our secondary application?
Once you submit your AMCAS application, you cannot edit it anymore. The only thing you can change on it is your contact information. So you'll want to make sure you can put on your AMCAS application anticipated hours. So you're able to write in, this is what I plan to do this year. I can tell you, you don't want the majority of your hours to be anticipated. You want most of them to be done to a competitive level and then continue on throughout the admission cycle. But you can put anticipated hours, and we do accept updates. So you can submit an update to your application, but it's like a separate document that you put in the secondary portal. It's not going to be edited on the AMCAS application.
I had a quick question about the letter writers.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that on the website it says like the letters need to come from like one science professor, one non-science professor. Does it, we have a lot of students who ask if like the person that they're doing research with can do it instead of someone who taught them. Does it make a difference if it's a science professor that they've only done research with, or do you guys prefer to see that the student actually took a class with that professor?
Yeah, it needs to be somebody that taught them in a classroom setting, not a lab. A lab can be one of the character letters.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, so I'm sure you're all wondering, what are the things that get you to the interview, right? That's the first big hurdle because we have usually an average of 5,100 applications a year. We interview 500 people, and typically a little over half of those will end up getting an acceptance to fill our 120 person class. So it takes a lot to even get to the point of getting interviewed because there are so many strong applicants each year. So obviously your academic performance is critically important. This is a school, and we have to try to ensure that those we admit have demonstrated the ability to get through very rigorous academic coursework because it does not benefit anybody, not you, not us, to admit students who have not shown that they would be able to handle the rigors of medical school. It's incredibly difficult, even for students who have done really well in undergrad. No, nobody's walking out of here saying this was really easy. So we're going to look at your GPA. We're going to look at your grade trends. So maybe your freshman year wasn't so great, but since then you've really improved. That's okay. The rigor of your course load. So did you just take one hard class at a time? Were you balancing your time very well? How did you do on the MCAT? Like it or not, the combination of the MCAT and your GPA is the greatest predictor of success on your board exams, which if you don't pass your board exams, you cannot become a physician. If you don't pass the first board exam at the end of second year, you cannot continue in medical school. So we have to look at these factors to try and predict whether or not we think you'll be able to get through the curriculum here. What your major is does not matter to us. We have people in every kind of major here. Of course, at UCF, biomedical sciences tends to be the most popular one. Overall, pre-meds tend to pick science majors, but it's not an absolute thing. I don't even look at your major when I'm looking at applications. So it does not matter to me. We have really good students who've come from all different kinds of academic backgrounds. Your letters of recommendation, they are very important. So you should take them seriously and really think about who you ask to write these letters. You want them to be people who know you, who can write a genuine letter about you, not just a templated letter. If the person barely knows you, they're probably not going to be able to write a quality letter. And letters of recommendation can really turn the tide for an applicant. So you want to pick people. If you've spent thousands of hours doing research with somebody and you don't have a letter from them, our committee members are going to wonder, why didn't this person write a letter for this student? They spent so much time. If you can get a letter from a physician that you've shadowed with, worked with, volunteered with, physician letters are always very good to have. We do require 3 letters. If your current student, we require one science faculty and two letters of your choosing. And then if you have graduated and it's been more than a year since you graduated, we can take a supervisor letter in place of the faculty letter and then the two character letters. You can submit up to 5 letters. More is not always better. So you just want to have the best quality letters that you can possibly get. Your personal statement is also really important. Our committee is going to pay a lot of attention to that. They're going to look at what your medical motivation is through your writing. You're going to tell a story. Why do you want to be a physician? What is it that you're bringing to our medical school? We're going to ask that in the secondary application. And I can tell you, they glean a lot of stuff from these personal statements. Why you're going into this? Do you have the maturity to be going to medical school right now? Did you pay attention to detail when you were writing this? Did you proofread it before you submitted it? Or did you just rush through and make a really short statement and get your application in? So take your time with this, get lots of proofreaders to look at it before you submit it. And then your secondary applications, take your time with those. They are going to be daunting, but it's important that you really take your time and fill them out appropriately. Because again, if you just rush through and barely put any effort into it, that's what it's going to look like. And we will probably just go with an applicant who looks like they did care enough to take time on their secondary application. So think about what you're writing in there. Again, proofread before you submit. Any questions about these components of a competitive application before I get into sort of the resume stuff?
I do have a couple questions in the chat,
Okay.
4 to be precise. So the first one was from Allie. They say, can both the letters of recommendation be from science professors?
Yes. All 3 could be if you wanted.
Awesome. Second question is, what if we have a strong MCAT score but a semi-poor GPA?
Generally, a strong MCAT is not going to make up for 4 years of academic performance. So you can't just blow the MCAT out of the water, but not have done very well in undergrad. Normally, students in those situations are going to have to go do some post-bac work or master's degree to show that they can do the work.
Thank you. Another question from Abby. They say, if we work in clinical healthcare, would it be recommended to have our boss give an LOR even if they themselves are not a physician?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm sorry, your audio cut out a little there.
Yeah, that's fine. They can have a supervisor.
Perfect. Another question from Maggie. What are some turnaways commonly seen in the personal statement? Not just grammatical errors, but the quote unquote storytelling. What are some cliches to avoid?
Again, the maturity, I feel like that comes up a lot in the committee meetings where a student maybe what they chose to write about or why they're interested in medicine or how they wrote, they may question the applicant's maturity. That comes up. One thing that I always suggest students avoid doing is if your motivation for medicine stems from maybe your bad experiences with a physician, physicians, healthcare. If in your application, when we asked, did you get any grades less than a B minus, those places are not places to be airing your grievances against physicians and faculty. Because guess who's reading your application? Physicians and faculty. And they don't like to read about how you either knew better than the physician or that it wasn't your fault you got the grade, it was your bad teacher. They don't generally like excuse making. They don't usually care for applicants kind of projecting that they're going to reform healthcare single-handedly. It just sort of shows some like naive mindset. So things like that, I usually don't see landing well with our reviewers. So I would avoid that type of a thing. You can still spin your essay, even if your motivation stems from negative experiences, you can still spin it in a positive way. So, but just, I wouldn't be like condemning doctors and faculty in your application.
Thank you. And I meant cliches.
It's okay. I knew what you meant.
Thank you. Thank you for the response. And I have one more question that came in from Joshua. They say, what is generally considered a competitive GPA?
Our average is a 3.8 usually.
Thank you. That's all the questions I saw in the chat.
I
So now
had a
we
quick
try you
question
for-
again.
Yeah, go ahead.
So usually we have a couple students, like I've had students who brought their personal statement here to us, and they'll talk a lot about wanting to go into the military and stuff like that. How do you guys view that when it's like they're talking more about the military more than how they're talking about medicine?
Like they want to be a military physician?
Yeah, but it's more like because even recently we had one who spoke a lot about wanting to join the military, and he did mention that he wants to be in medicine in the military, but he kind of more spoke about military experience more than wanting to be a physician.
Was he former military?
No.
He'd never had any military experience. Okay. Um, I would probably steer somebody to kind of flip it and talk more about being why they want to be a physician and why they think being a military physician is, the area that they want to go into. And hopefully they've got some experiences that support that idea.
Okay. And how much value does it have mentioning wanting the military experience with it? Does that add any value to the the person's application?
Not necessarily. I mean, I would say veterans tend to get a little bit of a leg up because we have had very good experiences with veterans who go into medical school. They tend to be more mature, they have life experience, they have a lot of teamwork and leadership experience, which is important as a physician. Um, so that I think can benefit an applicant, but just saying you want to go into military medicine if you have no military background and if usually if they're talking about going into like the HPSP, getting military scholarship to go to medical school, if they haven't even been approved for that, which likely they have not at that stage, um, it's just kind of what they're saying. It's nothing is actually in place for that to be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay. Okay, so the next thing, the kind of resume builders that you want to have in place before you apply. So the types of things we like to see in an application include significant and meaningful medical experiences. That's going to be medical volunteering, um, volunteering in free clinics or not free clinics, volunteering in hospitals. Maybe if you speak a second language and you're able to interpret at a clinic, like that would be great experience. We just really want to see you doing things for others that you're not, it's not to your benefit. It's to your benefit because you need it for your resume, but you're not getting compensated to do this. Um, and that you're observing what goes on in a clinical setting. You're interacting with patients, physicians, other clinicians, shadowing doctors, very important. I know it's difficult to get shadowing hours. A lot of students have started scribing because many more students need to work while in college, and you do get paid to be a scribe. So, scribing is a great way to observe physicians at work. You don't want to be doing like the telehealth kind of scribing, though. You need to actually be like in the clinical setting with the physician if you're going to try and count that as shadowing. Community service. This can be in any area. So if you want to tutor, if you coach, if you want to volunteer at the Humane Society or the Boys and Girls Club, um, anything like that, we really like to see teamwork and leadership activities. That could be a job that you have. Maybe you are in some student orgs at school. So anywhere where you're working with others. You don't have to be on the board of every organization that you're in, but it would be good if you took on some leadership at some activity that you've done prior to applying. Research, it's not required to be accepted, but more and more people have research on their application. So you'll want to see if you can find some experiences there. A lot of the hospitals actually have research opportunities. I know Nemours does summer research programs. If you go on the AAMC's website, again, aamc.org, they have student research opportunities and they give you an opportunity to go live somewhere else for the summer. So definitely check those out if you're having a hard time finding anything at UCF, which I know it can be difficult. An event that's coming up very soon, this weekend, actually in 2 days. And I don't know if anybody on this call is in any of the student orgs, but We have the annual medical school admissions symposium. We host it here at the medical school. I'm not sure if registration's still open. I think you can even register day of if there's space. But it's a great event that we host. I just kind of help the students. I'm not hosting, they do all the work. But the pre-med, four of the pre-med clubs organize this event. It has all the directors from the various MD programs in Florida, as well as some DO programs, Caribbean programs, and other MD programs outside the state. So it gives you an opportunity to hear from people like me about their program without having to go to these places. Most medical schools don't have tours and info sessions like you're going to see in undergrad. Some schools do, but not all of them. So it's a great event, networking with peers. They have a keynote speaker, you get fed. It does have a fee, but I don't think it's too much. Maybe it's like $25 or $30. And it's here at the medical school. And I think they usually have a bus for main campus. So if you are in AMSA or IMO or what are the other, there's two other groups. Check out their Facebooks, their Instagrams, and you'll be able to you'll be able to register, I believe, still for Saturday. If you're only a freshman or sophomore, I wouldn't worry about it, but juniors and seniors, you probably find it beneficial. And that's my last slide. What other questions do you all have for me?
I'm back with more questions. We've been getting so many. I'm really happy. All right, so the first one is from Megan. Around how many shadowing hours should we have?
I usually say at least 100.
Okay. Abby says on the application, would we put scribing hours under shadowing experience or clinical hours? Are
Usually you
those
put listed under paid work and we'll sort of reshuffle it to where we need it to be.
are those separate on the application?
Yes. There's paid clinical work, paid non-clinical work. There's lots of little tags for the different activities.
Okay, awesome. Kate says, is it frowned upon if the bulk of our clinical and shadowing hours is in one clinical specialty?
No, it's okay.
Do what you love. Joshua says, I currently work as a scribe. Would it be better to demonstrate commitment to the job by staying for the rest of college, or would it be better to do different jobs?
I think it's okay if you like scribing, you can keep doing it. Otherwise, even if you're scribing, I would try and get some traditional shadowing hours. I wouldn't just only do the scribing. So if by being a scribe, that allows you to ask the physicians you work with, like, could I shadow you, here and there, then stick that out. But you don't have to do it for 4 years.
Okay, yeah, that's all the questions I saw in the chat. Oh, another one from Nicole just popped up. They say, when asking for LOR, should you ask a science professor you had a class with a C, or would you have a different science professor you never had a class with write you an LOR?
It has to be someone who taught you. So you can't ask somebody who has never taught you before. Hopefully you have some science professors that you didn't get a C in. And I would probably go with those people unless you think for some reason that person has a reason to write an exceptional letter for you.
Interesting. Maggie also says, what are some ways to get non-paid clinical hours? I hear about medical scribing a lot, but that is paid.
Non-paid clinical, so that would be like volunteering. So volunteering at hospitals, clinics. There's free clinics in Orlando that people volunteer at. I usually even count, like, if you do like crisis counseling, what else have I seen people do? EMT work. Some people do that as either paid, some do it volunteer. Things like that are usually the clinical things we see. Hospice.
And Megan says, we don't get any equations at all for the MCAT, correct?
Equations.
Equations?
Like to take with you to take the exam? Like a cheat sheet, kind of? Is that what you're talking about?
We'll see what yes.
Yes. I doubt it. I don't know for sure, but I would be very surprised if you can bring anything at all with you.
Kate also says, do research-based classes count as science, or does it have to be hard sciences?
Depends on the class. So generally, probably not. Usually it's going to be your biology, chemistry, physics type of classes that we would be looking for.
Okay. There was another question about how many clinical hours would you recommend? You said around 100, correct?
For shadowing. Clinical volunteering, we usually like to see if 200-300 hours over 4 years.
Never mind, 200 to 300 hours. Okay. Another question from Kate. Does research done for coursework count for research hours?
Generally, no. If it's something required for your class, we usually don't count it in some other category.
That's a great opportunity for me to plug AAP. If you guys are looking for research opportunities and are struggling to find someone, reach out to us. We have one-on-one meetings that we can set up with you guys to go through a pathway so that you can find that research mentor that you're looking for. Start off early. That's my recommendation.
Yes. It's a lot of begging.
Richard says, yes. Richard says, if I took a class of animal genetics in my past institution, would that count as general genetics? That might be a question for
We
admissions.
don't require genetics, so
Okay, another question. I have heard how hobbies / extracurriculars add to a student's application. How would you recommend a student showcases their hobbies on their application? For example, learning to play an instrument.
I don't love hobbies, but I can only speak for myself. So if you're going to list hobbies, do not list like thousands of hours of hobbies if you've got about 50 hours of volunteering, because you might as well just throw your own application away, because that's not going to look good. It's going to look like you spend a lot of time on you and not a lot of time on anybody else. So I don't personally think that anybody's ever gotten into medical school because of their hobbies. You don't need to put things like I like to read, I like to cook, I like to, if it's something like exceptional, then put it. But just to fill in spaces, hopefully you've done more substantial things to include in those 15 spots. And I don't I don't love hobbies.
Okay. Nicole says, last question. If we attended conferences, are we able to include it on the application?
Yes, there is a drop down option to include conferences.
Okay, is the honors undergraduate thesis still beneficial for med school if it's in psychology?
Yep.
And if we have completed research classes but no research outside of those classes, would that take away from our strength as an applicant?
It's not going to take away from your strength, but you'll want to try and get some research experience outside the class, like the research methods class you took.
Come talk to us at AAP.
Use your resources, put those tuition and fees to work.
Yeah. All right, I'm not seeing any more questions.
I do have a question. Sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I have two. So for the research, a lot of times we do recommend, because we have a lot of students who will come in there in like their senior year or probably more to the end of their junior year, and they have a lot of issues getting research opportunities. So a lot of times we do recommend to them like post-bac programs, but they only do that for like a year. Does that make a difference, or do you guys look for more research outside of the probably 1 year of post-bac? And how
That's okay. They can do
that's
that.
okay. Okay. And then for the shadowing and the experiences, a lot of times I know that, for example, on our list that we give students, we usually tell them you need your medical volunteering, your non-medical volunteering, your shadowing, your like some form of leadership experience and research. We do have a lot of students who will come by and kind of like stress on the fact that they don't have paid work experience. We usually have it in like the recommended section, like it's something that you can just add for like to be a little bit more competitive. But how high of a recommendation would you place that paid work experience?
We don't care if you have any paid work experience.
Okay. I think those were my main two. So,
okay.
Thank you.
All right, we are running a little low on time. Would you like to keep answering questions in the chat, or would you like me to direct those questions to your email?
I can answer. I saw something about age or something. Hold on, let me scroll down. I got messages of CME credits. Would earning these help? I don't know what CME is. You would look at your age, how quickly you graduate undergrad. I'm guessing this person's asking because they are young. We generally don't advise students to finish college in 2 years and apply as a 19-year-old because it's not the fact that you're 19. The fact is that most of the time, if you did dual enrollment in high school and then you apply, you literally got 1 year at UCF before you're applying to medical school. Most people aren't able to do in that 1 year what other people can get done in 3 years. Because generally you are too young to do a lot of the hospital things, clinic things. Most places don't let under 18s volunteer in a clinical setting. So, again, it's nothing to do with your age. We're not looking at what year you were born when we're going through the applications. It's just generally what we see is their applications aren't as strong. And typically the interviews don't go as well because there's just a lot less life experience. And what I typically suggest is if you aren't interested in doing a double major, adding a minor, that maybe do a research year or, um, do something else substantial for a year and then apply. So you don't have to wait 2 more years, but give yourself some time to really build out your application, get some more life experience, and then you'll be in a much better place when you apply. Letterheads, letter. So if somebody doesn't work at UCF anymore and you want them to write a letter or at a workplace, they don't have to have letterhead, but they do need to make sure they sign your letter and put contact information. And that's all I see in the chat.
That's all I see too. If you would like to continue asking questions, Laurel said that she would share her email in the chat if you don't mind doing that now. Thank you guys all for your questions. Thank you for being so engaged throughout the entire session. Thank you so much, Laurel, for your slides, for all the information that you gave us. Like I said at the beginning, I would drop a survey in the chat as well for everyone. We'd like to hear back from you. We're constantly improving these, and we want to tailor it as much as for you guys as we can. So let me go ahead and post it in the chat.
I'll go so you guys can fill out your surveys.
Oh, thank you so much. I
You're
hope you guys have a
welcome.
good rest of your day.
You too. Bye-bye.
All right, for everyone who's still
Appreciate-
here, yeah, it's in the chat. Go ahead and fill that out. Let me know if you have any issues.
All right. I wanted to ask if the research application process through AAP is still available after you graduate.
We will definitely, I would say we'd love to support you, but it is geared towards current students.
We don't have a research application. Sorry.
I'm sorry?
We don't have a research application. We help you, we provide you with resources to get research, but we don't have a research application.
I see.
Yeah.
I see what the question is now.
Yeah, we don't have an application, but you're welcome to meet with us. We don't have a deadline either for after students graduate, at least not right now. So you can meet with us for as long as until they change it, because I think they're going to change it. But currently, no matter when you graduate.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Sorry for jumping in, but we don't have a research application.
All right. If there aren't any more questions, thank you guys so much for coming. And please feel free to contact AAP whenever you need.
I'm so sorry, I have a question.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
So I'm graduating this fall, but I'm looking to apply for this next year's med school cycle, but I don't have any research experience outside of my classes. Do you have like resources to do like something for it?
Yes. You cut out a little bit right there, but a little earlier I sent this link tree in the chat. So AAP has as many resources as you can think of. We can give you one-on-one meetings. You can come to workshops just like these. But those one-on-one meetings, you can meet with a peer mentor, and it's someone who has gone through the process of looking for a research mentor, and research experiences overall. So you are able to tell them what you need, and then you'll create a pathway for whatever your goal is. So I definitely recommend that. You should see it in the link tree. But yeah, no, I definitely recommend continue going to these workshops, because it's that experience that you don't get outside of that you don't get inside of your classes, and that information. It's very beneficial, but definitely the one-on-one meetings.
Cool. Thank you so much.
No problem. And I wish you good luck.